call the meeting for Tuesday, February 15th to order. On our agenda today is a hearing on Senate Bill 450, so we will open that hearing and we will ask Eileen to give us a bill overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 450 would authorize state educational institutions to convey real property given to such an institution as an endowment, bequest, or gift following Board of Regents policies, and authorize the Board of Regents to adopt such policies. So new Section 1 of the bill would create a new provision of law that would grant the State Board of Regents the authority to authorize a state educational institution the ability to sell and convey real property that was given to the state educational institution as an endowment, bequest, or gift. This section would also grant the State Board of Regents the authority to adopt policies governing the procedures and conditions under which a state educational institution may sell and convey such real property. Further, new Section 1 would also require the State Board of Regents to submit to the Legislature a list of any real property transfers that occurred during the previous fiscal year. The bill would also exempt the sale and conveyance of real property given as an endowment, bequest, or gift to a state educational institution from the provisions of KSA 75-6609, which specify the processes and requirements that the Department of Administration follows in identifying surplus real estate for sale, and from the provision requiring that 20% of the proceeds from such sales be deposited in the state treasury and credited to the surplus real estate fund. Section 2 amends KSA 75-6609 itself to state that the sale and conveyance of real estate given as an endowment, bequest, or gift to a state educational institution would be subject to the provisions of new Section 1. The bill would become effective upon its publication in the statute book. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions. That's correct. It's real property that was donated, given as a gift.
Committee, are there additional questions? See none. Thank you, Eileen. We will now have informational testimony from Alan Conroy with Capers. Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Glad to be here. As Eileen, of course, has dutifully explained the bill, I'll just remind you that from the previous testimony on Senate Bill 322, since these provisions were in place, Capers has received a total of $1.9 million from the sale of 7 different types of real estate transactions, surplus property sales, none of which were Regents. During the last 10 years, every time there's been a Regents property that's come up, the provisions of this bill have been exempted. And so, and in fact, I guess in some ways it kind of places in statute what the practice has been as it relates to Regents real estate property. And just to remind you, this bill does not move the actuarial needle one way or the other. Since it's an infrequent, it's not a guaranteed revenue stream, the actuary does not anticipate or build in receipts of any of this money into the Capers valuation calculations. So, and with that, I'd be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Alan. Committee, are there questions of Alan? Alan, remind me, on 322, when we had that testimony, I think there was about $1.8 million worth of money that had been sent to Capers from real estate, but about 1.1 of that was the insurance commissioner's office and the Dillon house, right?
That's correct. It was just almost a 1.9 million, and the two largest parcels that were sold were the Dillon house and then the insurance building. And the other ones, there were some children and families, corrections, labor, and so forth.
But no Regents.
No Regents.
Okay. Committee, last chance for a question for Alan. I see none. Thank you. We will now turn to the proponents. First up is Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. Welcome, Blake.
Committee. It's good to be here today to support Senate Bill 450. We see this as really assisting our efforts in terms of the deferred maintenance policies that we've adopted. We know that as we look at long-term trends, we likely need to shrink the footprint of our campuses, and this will provide us the opportunity to do that. As you know, that our retirement system in higher education is not a defined benefit system. It's a defined contribution system through TIAA. And so we do have a sprinkling of CAPERS employees that transitioned out of other systems, but doesn't have as big an impact on us. So we would, as we develop policy, obviously we'll stay in communication with you as we look to perhaps retire or sell some of these facilities so that we can shrink our footprint and actually help reduce the load of deferred maintenance on the campus in that way. So I would stand for any questions.
Blake, thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Senator Pittman.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You have are there numbers on how much this will actually help in terms of helping the deferred maintenance? Is there numbers that we can actually quote?
So we do not have that yet because we need to identify the facilities. We're just at step one. We need to identify the facilities that we would be taking out offline.
And on occasion, there are some colleagues that have a challenge with rules and regs and those being developed by agencies and such. These would be policies that the regents would actually be developing, correct? In terms of the policies, and I guess there would be no legislative check on that, but there's not legislative check on many different things like this, right?
Right. So there wouldn't be formally a legislative check. We look at all legislation as 1 year because you can always come back and amend that. So we would come back to report, here's what has happened, and that would give the legislature some oversight. Anything that is done in this vein is going to be at least reported out through the Joint Building Committee.
Got it. Thank you so much.
As a follow-up, Senator Pittman, I believe I'm correct. I think there are 6 land sale bills associated with universities in the legislature this year. Every single year we have a number of them that they need to come back to the legislature to receive permission to sell a piece of property. So I think this bill would help streamline that process, certainly. Any additional questions for Blake? Senator Gossage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's taken a moment for me to try to digest this. So in clear language, currently, if you were to sell property that was bequeathed or somebody had donated to a university, 80% of those proceeds would go to CAPERS. Is that correct? Okay. And this changes that again, how?
So then the proceeds would go back to the university. In earlier testimony, and particularly the testimony in a bill that's a bit parallel in Senate Bill 322, the dollars coming into CAPERS from these sales from the universities are negligible. There's just really no incentive to do that. We want to try to incentivize that behavior to become more efficient, and this bill would do that.
To become more efficient by?
By reducing our square footage.
By selling the property. Okay. And so the incentive to the college would be, hey, you'd be able to keep these dollars.
Yeah. You know, just past practice would suggest that no one is selling property, because if you had property and they said you can sell it, but you don't get to keep any of the proceeds, your incentive to sell it is very low.
And so you were saying this happens very seldom, but are you anticipating it's going to happen more often?
I do. This bill is relatively narrow in terms of which property could fall under the Board of Regents for approval, because it would have to be fully gifted. So if there were any state dollars in that property, then it would come through the legislative process.
Well, that makes sense to me, and I would think if I were able to donate something to my alma mater or whatever, and I would think if they were going to sell that property, that they would keep that within the university, perhaps even say, hey, it's going to go toward the education department or whatever it may be. That sounds like a good idea. Thank you so much.
Committee, additional questions? See none. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
We will now turn our attention to Mark Reesky, who is the university architect with Kansas University. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman Longbine and committee members. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 450. It gives the university agility to sell gifted, bestowed, endowed properties that we don't currently have. It would allow us to put those monies towards deferred maintenance, towards better space utilization. Basically, it would reduce campus footprints. It would, help pay for deferred maintenance costs, which we've got tremendous amounts of. It reduce annual utility costs by the sale of those buildings. Remove fiscal liability for maintaining buildings, and allow us to use our workforce better to maintain the buildings that we do retain. We would follow Board of Regents policy as adopted through this, and it appears through that policy we'd have annual reporting to do as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark, for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, thank you for your presentation. Not to say that you would, but how many buildings would you have at KU that might qualify under this area?
Sure. So we are currently doing research, and I know that seems strange that we'd be doing research on how buildings were first purchased, but we're doing research. We've actually completed that on what amounts to about 80 buildings. Of those 80 buildings, 16 would be endowed, bestowed, or gifted properties. And we still have a pretty long list to go, and it gets fairly complex because we've got buildings that are split funded from their origination. So they may have a gift, but they may have state monies in them too, which in our interpretation sends them to the state money side. So, a penny of state money means it's state money to us, the way we're looking at it. So we're solely looking for gifted, endowed, or bestowed, and sometimes those records are harder to find than one would think they should be.
Committee, additional questions? See none. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you all.
Committee, let me turn your attention to proponent written-only testimony from Ethan Erickson, who is the Chief Financial Officer at K-State, and Ken Hush, the interim president, and Diana Kuhlman, Vice President for Administration and Chief Financial Officer with Emporia State University. Is there any other proponents that wish to testify on the bill? Are there any neutrals? Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to the bill? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 450. Committee, you might be thinking between now and Thursday about I think we have a very similar bill in 322 that we've already heard, and maybe we should put those together in some kind of substitute bill. I'm sure that Eileen can work some magic for us and plan on her magic to appear on Thursday when we work bills. So, anything else that we need to cover today? I see none, so we are adjourned. We'll see you tomorrow.